Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our opinions and thoughts are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodges or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please remember to connect with us and ask questions either here on the YouTube chat in the chat room or on Facebook and also our Discord server. I am one of your hosts, David Colbeth from Bonnie Lake, Washington, a past master of King Solomon Lodge in Auburn, Washington, 32nd degree Freemason, Scottish Rite Mason out of the Valley of Tacoma, and several other things. Today, unfortunately, we're not able to be joined by our other co-hosts, Stephen Chung. He is enjoying vacation day, enjoying Canada Day, and so celebrate that. And Connor, our other co-host, is on a family emergency, so keep him in your thoughts and prayers. But we have a new and ongoing co-host with Matt Appel. So Matt, if you could introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Matt Appel. I'm currently serving as the District Deputy in District 2 of the Grand Lodge of Washington, and I'm involved with Scottish Rite like David. And I'm just happy to be here today, and for my all of second show now. And I'll pass it on to most worshipful brother Jim Mendoza, who's next up in line there.
Hey guys, hope everyone can hear me. Can everyone hear me?
Absolutely.
Great. Hey guys, this is Jim Mendoza. As you know, past Grand Master Washington, currently involved heavily with Scottish Rite, the personal representative in Tacoma, trying real hard to be a has-been, failing miserably. That's okay. But we're really pleased to have everyone today because this is kind of a different take on what we normally talk about on the podcast. We're going to be talking about kind of a lighter topic, and that is basically the connection of Freemasonry and baseball. And who better to help us out with that than the current current manager of on-site learning at the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. And I'm going to have him tell you a little bit more about himself, and that's Nathan Tweedie. Nathan.
Oh, thank you so much, Jim. So my name is Nathan Tweedie. I am the manager of on-site learning at the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum in Cooperstown. Actually coming to you right from my office in Cooperstown. So show's coming from a Hall of Fame. So I guess we could be the first and only Hall of Fame podcast. How's that sound?
I like that a lot. So Nathan and I met totally by chance last summer. I was walking. My lodge as a gift sent me to New York, and I kind of modified that gift because I always wanted to go to Cooperstown. So it was I think a Monday or Tuesday night. Laura and I had dinner at one of the places in Cooperstown, and we were just walking along. And Nathan and then someone taps me on the shoulder. Nathan, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah. So I should take a step back and just say that I'm the current lodge historian for Otsego Lodge, which is the only lodge, Otsego Lodge number 138, the only lodge in Cooperstown, New York. And for those baseball purists out there, our lodge is actually older than baseball. So there you go. Lodge was officially, our officers were installed in 1795, and our first meeting was in 1796. So as far as I know, there's no records of baseball prior to that. I was actually, I am a co-host for the ghost tours in Cooperstown, and I was waiting around to see if anyone was going to show up for a ghost tour that evening. And I saw Jim walk past me with a square and compasses on his sweater or his vest, and no one wound up coming. So I wanted to see him come back, so ran over, tapped him on the shoulder, started chatting with him. Found out he is a past Grand Master, was there on a trip, so that was unexpected little surprise. We don't get too many Grand Masters visiting us in our little town of less than 2,000 year-round residents. So that was a nice surprise. I don't think I've ever seen a New York Grand Master there, let alone one from another state. One of the perks of living in a tourist town, for sure. And we started chatting and just happened to be right outside our lodge as well, right outside the temple in Cooperstown, which is right on Main Street. As you're going down Main Street in Cooperstown, you'll see a big flagpole right at the intersection of Main and Pioneer Streets. And you can't miss it. And so our lodge is right there. We own one of the buildings on the corner, one of the four corners. And we chatted for a bit. And then our current district deputy just happened to be walking down the street with his wife. So he joined in the conversation. And from there, really the friendship took off, and yeah, so Jim and I share quite a few passions, including baseball, obviously Masonry, and also theater. So
yeah, no, it's a good time. So first of all, David, you'll be happy to know that the vest I was wearing was a Sons of Hiram vest. So you'll be happy to know that I was wearing that vest.
Excellent little plug for that. Yeah, those dang district deputies just show up everywhere, right?
Exactly. But Nathan, a little bit about your lodge. You said you're a member of Otsego Lodge in Cooperstown, but the numbering of your lodge is a little unique. If memory serves, it's 128, but it's actually supposed to be a smaller number.
Yeah, so it's 138. Almost had it.
Okay.
Yeah, so 138, which seems pretty high for a lodge founded in the 1700s, because it is pretty high for a lodge founded in the 1700s. So we have an interesting history. So we originally founded as Otsego Lodge number 40. We also had a Mark Master Lodge. Yeah, we had a Mark Master Lodge also there before our chapter was founded. So really early American Masonry really kind of etched itself out there. Kind of put yourself in the idea of what I'm talking about, the time period when our lodge was founded. Those of you familiar with the film or the book Last of the Mohicans, was written by James Fenimore Cooper, whose father was William Cooper, that founded Cooperstown. So while not all of that film takes place in Cooperstown per se, the Leatherstocking Tales take place right in that area. So we're really talking the frontier of the United States when our lodge was founded, which is pretty cool. But anyway, yeah, so we were Otsego Lodge number 40. And then I'm not sure exactly why. I have to dive more into the Grand Lodge archives to find out why exactly it was changed from 40 to 41. You notice that's not our current number, but it's changed to Otsego Lodge number 41 at some point in the 1800s. And then fast forward into the anti-Masonic period. So being in New York, where the Morgan Affair took place, the anti-Masonic movement was pretty strong here. And we still met during the anti-Masonic years, and our lodge kind of went dark. We met once a year to elect officers and take care of the basics that we had to. And actually, it's really cool. One of the buildings on Pioneer Street, which you can actually see from our current Masonic temple, has some Masonic symbols kind of built into the stonework facade. There's a man in a top hat. There's a trowel, and if you look at the year that's built into it, it's right in the beginning of the anti-Masonic period. So it's a really cool building that we can connect to. But yeah, so we continued to meet. But the first year that we went to the one meeting a year format, we paid our dues to the Grand Lodge of New York, as we should. And then this is where you might get a different story if you look at the records from Grand Lodge at the time. But our lodge claims they never received any more dues notices from Grand Lodge. So they never paid because they never received any dues notices. Fast forward about 25 years, and the members of the lodge received notification from someone who was not a member of the craft that the junior Grand Warden was in town looking for their charter. Trying to pull it. So the lodge scrambled together, received the junior Grand Warden, and with how New York state law was at the time, fraternal organizations couldn't legally own property unless they had a local connection. So being that New York State would take possession of all lodge holdings, including the Masonic Hall at that point, the junior Grand Warden was allowed them to operate under dispensation, I suppose is the best way to call it. But really, they just didn't pull the charter, despite the Grand Master telling them to, until a new charter was issued. And that new charter, which was issued, wasn't for number 41, but rather for number 138. So we've been continuously chartered since we were originally chartered, but we've functioned under 3 separate names and 2 separate charters. So it gets a little interesting. I don't know of any other lodge that's had a history quite like that one. But that's the long story of how we got from Otsego Lodge number 40 to 138.
Now, you bring up an interesting term, leather stocking, because I was out there, as you know, for the Grand Lodge, and I guess you guys are the leather stocking district. And, you know, over here, our districts are by number. Like, for example, you heard that Matt's deputy of district number 2, Dave is deputy of district number 13, and you got names. So what's that all about?
Yeah, so not all of our districts have really unique names. Some of them are like, there's the 1st and 2nd Manhattan districts. Manhattan has so many Masons, they get 2 districts, or multiple, I should say. Whereas the Central Leatherstocking District is the full name of our district. It's a newly formed district. We merged the Otsego Schoharie District with the Delaware District, and those were named by the counties that they comprise. So we're 3 separate counties. By comparison, Delaware County is larger than the state of Rhode Island, so just that's a fairly large district. Then it merged with Schoharie and Otsego counties district to form the Central Leatherstocking. And so our district, if you drive from tip to tip, can take about 3.5 hours, depending on the route you take. So it's a pretty large geographic area. But most of the lodges are fairly close. To get from any one lodge to another probably wouldn't take you more than an hour 20 at the most. So for us, it's not too bad, but I can see how other districts might see how that's different. But the problem is, since we are named districts, sometimes it's kind of hard to come up with a name to include those districts that's all encompassing. So Central Leatherstocking really covers us pretty well, as the northern part of our district is kind of at the southern tip of the Adirondacks. The southern part of our district is in the northern edge of the Catskills, and the western part of our district is in the southern tier, kind of near Syracuse and then Binghamton, the I-81 corridor. So, and completely different geographies. So, it's hard to find something that kind of unites us all together. So, this is the Leatherstocking region, based on the Leatherstocking tales from James Fenimore Cooper, which comes from stocking meaning sock, and leather socks. So that's what the early pioneers would wear to protect their legs from brambles and other things like that. So that's where we get our name from. We're in central New York, so Central Leatherstocking District.
Wow. So, the people who are going to be who are trying to track all that live, when you go on YouTube to watch that, again, track where Nathan kind of laid out the district, and so you can kind of map that out. And we're going to talk about maps in New York in a little bit here, because, you talk about the history of your lodge and how it has, I'm trying to find the right word, but, different people understand different things. Baseball's kind of similar in that regard. We don't really know how baseball started or who started it. When I was in Cooperstown, I saw Doubleday Field. I took pictures of Doubleday Field, but that's, I'll let you take it over from here.
So let's start with the Doubleday myth. So those who aren't baseball fans, according to the Doubleday myth, and the key word there is myth. We are all pretty familiar with that term in Masonry. The myth that baseball was invented in Cooperstown actually has Masonic connections, which is pretty interesting. But according to this myth, or this legend, if you will, depending on who you talk to, Abner Doubleday, the Civil War hero for the Union, gained fame at the Battle of Gettysburg, did live in Cooperstown. And according to the Doubleday myth, Abner Doubleday, along with 17 other guys, invented the game of baseball in Cooperstown in 1839. Obviously, that's not the case, as Jim pointed out. But that story, that's completely untrue, and there's plenty of evidence supporting the fact that it's not true. Says that myth is why the Hall of Fame is here in Cooperstown, really the middle of nowhere. You can't just stumble upon it by accident. You have to want to come to Cooperstown. It's a decent trek to the nearest airport, so you have to want to come here. So with that, the story goes that on a day in the summer of 1839, I forget the exact date, that Abner Doubleday invented it at Finney's Field. Now, Finney being the name of the first worshipful master of Otsego Lodge. His name was Elihu Finney. He was a printer in Cooperstown, and it was his son's field, and his grandson, according to the story, was the catcher at the game. So there's a Masonic connection right there from the beginning. Many people want to claim Abner Doubleday as a Freemason. There's no evidence that I've come across anywhere supporting that he is. However, some of his family members, there are several Doubledays that were members of Otsego Lodge. He was never one of them. It's worth noting he really didn't live here all that long. He lived here. He wasn't born here. He joined the Army. He went to West Point at the U.S. Military Academy. And actually, the day that he allegedly invented baseball in Cooperstown is actually a day he was checked in as a cadet at West Point. And while you could be in both places today in the same day, there's no way in 1839 that he was going from Cooperstown to West Point. There's just no way. So from the very beginnings, that's the story. But the truth actually is that baseball evolved. To say any one person or any one place is the birthplace or birth person of baseball just is simply untrue. With basketball, we know Naismith invented it. Dr. Naismith invented it. Springfield has the Naismith Museum and Basketball Hall of Fame because, well, that's where he did it, right? Springfield College. With Cooperstown and baseball, we really don't, other than that story that I just told you, we really don't know where it came from. The best guesses that some historians have come up with is that stick and ball games, which have been around since the times of the ancient Egyptians, kind of merged together and formed into two different games, one known as town ball in New England, and New York being not a New England state, even though we border them, a mid-Atlantic state. In the mid-Atlantic states, they played by a set of rules called the Knickerbocker rules. And the real big difference between those two was that town ball, or the New England game, tended to be played on a square shape. And they'd throw the ball to a batter kind of in the middle of that square, and then they'd run to a corner, run to a second corner, a third corner, and then back to the fourth corner to score a run, which is really similar to the game of rounders, if anyone's ever played that. It's a game I wasn't familiar with at all until I spent some time in Scotland with the Scouts, and they ended every game by playing a game of rounders. It's like, hey, I get this game. It makes sense. It's baseball. But the Knickerbocker rules are much more what you'd recognize as baseball. So 9 players on a diamond, including a shortstop. And if you ever hear people talk about the game at the Elysian Fields in Hoboken, New Jersey, a lot of people consider that to be the first baseball game. Well, that's not necessarily true, but it's the first game played by the Knickerbocker rules, which are, as far as we know, the first set of rules of that form of baseball. And then what we tend to teach here at the Hall of Fame with school groups that come to visit on their field trips is that those two games during the Civil War, for those who aren't from the U.S., it's 1861 to 1865. Those two forms of baseball merged in the camps of the war, and then when the war ended in 1865, we kind of get a new version of the game coming out back into the United States. And it's not a big surprise then that just 4 years later, after that, we get our first professional baseball teams. So 1869, the Cincinnati Red Stockings really get a lot of credit as being the first professional baseball team. There's actually quite a lot of evidence there were other teams playing that same year as well. But they're the undefeated team. They're the ones that most everyone knows. And that's why if you look at any MLB uniforms this year, you'll see a nice little patch on the sleeve that says MLB 150, because it's been 150 years since the first professional team. But really, that's what we here at the Hall of Fame say. It's the Civil War brings those two games together, and what comes out of it is more or less modern baseball. Trust me, there's still plenty different from 1869 to 2019.
Now, along those same lines, you bring up the Knickerbocker rules. Wasn't it Albert Spalding who was the main proponent of those? And now we do know that he's a Mason. Mm-hmm. So go ahead from there.
Yeah, so Spalding actually played on that 1869, on the Cincinnati Red Stockings team. And he really was like the LeBron James of his time. He was the biggest name in baseball and retired at the height of his career to form Spalding Sporting Goods, which is pretty cool. And I know it's not exactly what you asked me here, but I'll get to that eventually. But he formed a commission to find the American origins of baseball. And that commission is the one that declared, and of course, great historical research was done, that that baseball was invented in Cooperstown in 1839. So another connection back there with Brother Spalding. But Spalding definitely would have known the Knickerbocker rules, definitely played by that new set of rules that was coming out after the Civil War, and really was one of the first huge stars of the game. And he was a huge reason why baseball spread. He used his celebrity to spread the game as well as his sporting goods company to promote the game. So it's pretty cool. As far as people who get credited as being founders of the game, oh man, I'm totally blanking on a name here. It'll come to me when I don't want it. But anyway, one of the guys that is most credited with being the one responsible for founding the Hall of Fame was Alexander Cartwright. There we go. That's the name.
It was Cartwright that I wanted to say, not Spalding. It was Cartwright Mason. Yeah, that's
Cartwright. Yeah, he's also on that same team. So not right team. So Cartwright. If you look at his Hall of Fame plaque, it says "Father of Modern Baseball." Now, since that plaque was made, there's been some additional historical research done, and that may not necessarily be as true as we may want it to be. But he's really the guy that gets credited with the biggest role in developing those Knickerbocker rules, including the shortstop position and some other huge parts of what you'd recognize as baseball. And so there's this big conspiracy that people love to go to that, see, it really, those Masons, they're involved from baseball right from the start. Here's our proof. This guy, there's, especially for those of you who are Royal Arch Masons, the importance of the number 3, right? And the multiples of 3. And baseball's got 3 everywhere, right? 3 strikes, 3 outs, 9 innings, 27 batters per side in a 9-inning, or 27 outs per side in a 9-inning game. So the multiples of 3 just keep showing up everywhere in the game. So conspiracy theorists tend to have a field day with that, especially the fact that we play on a diamond of 90 feet between each bag. Yeah, we can go on all day if we want. But so, yeah, in all honesty, that's not a bad way to take it until you realize the facts that Cartwright didn't become a Mason until long after he spread baseball. So basically, he played some baseball early on. And then he got caught up in the gold rush, and he wanted to go out to California to go make some money. And as he traveled west, he spread baseball. And then he decided from there he wanted to continue on. I forget where his destination was supposed to be. He was going somewhere else in search of prospecting, and wound up getting sick on the boat. And they wound up tossing him, not tossing him overboard, but when they stopped for port in Hawaii, they told him, you can't get back on. Sorry, you got to stay here. He wound up recovering from his illness and spread baseball there, and was actually made a Mason in Hawaii. So all this took place before he was made a Mason. So sorry, guys. No great connection there for us either.
And so, and I believe Cartwright was the 6th master of what is now known as Honolulu Lodge. It was Honolulu Lodge number 21 under the Grand Lodge of California, and then when Hawaii divested themselves, now it's just straight Honolulu Lodge. So here's where we do know where Masons really come into play, though, and that's the fact that Cooperstown, specifically the Hall of Fame, was founded by a Mason.
It was, yeah. Stephen C. Clark, the grandfather of current chairman of the board, Jane Forbes Clark. But yeah, so Stephen C. Clark, we know for a fact, was a Mason. He was a member of my lodge, Otsego Lodge, was a master of a lodge in New York City. I forget which lodge he was master of down there. But yeah, there's no doubt he was a Mason, as well as he had a lot of help in developing the Hall of Fame from a guy by the name of Ford C. Frick. And I'm checking my notes real quick. And, oh, sorry, I'm wrong. It was Frankie Frisch. That's a Mason, not Ford C. Frick. Sorry, close enough names to get confused there. But yeah, so Stephen C. Clark was the founder of the Hall of Fame. And yeah, he was definitely a Mason. I've seen him sign into our lodge book quite a few times over the years. Obviously, he passed away long before I was even born, let alone a Mason, but he's definitely in our lodge archives. So yeah, there's no doubt there's a connection right from the beginning. And I don't know if you want me to continue on with that connection or
please do. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's pretty much the end of his story, really. Stephen C. Clark, as far as the connection to Masonry, he was a Mason. He founded the Hall of Fame, but he definitely wasn't the last. Actually, the very first class of the Hall of Fame were 5. It was Walter Johnson, Babe Ruth. I'm going to mess myself up here. Ty Cobb, Hannes Wagner, and somebody else.
Christy Mathewson, right?
Mathewson, thank you. Yeah, and 3 of them were Masons upon being elected. So 60% right off the bat are Masons. So not a bad percentage if you're going for some of the greatest baseball players of all time. So yeah, not bad. And that's continued.
Just a quick aside: when I was there visiting, Eric Stroll, who actually happens to also be a member of Otsego Lodge, past master, I believe. He put a ball in my hand that was a fundraiser back in the day for when Christy Mathewson had tuberculosis. And you mentioned the Adirondacks earlier, and I guess the cure, if you will, for tuberculosis back in the day was, we're going to send you to the Adirondacks. But I found it funny that he gives me this ball, right, signed by, I believe at the time, 21 guys, many of them who became Hall of Famers. He pointed out 2 things for me. One, that Babe Ruth always signed in the sweet spot. And just below Babe Ruth's signature, just outside the sweet spot, happened to be the hits leader of that year, George Sisler. And then he said, "Oh, and for some bizarre reason, Calvin Coolidge's name is signed on here as well." But no, so the Christy Mathewson thing was that just jumped out at me. They say that ball sold for $800 back in 1921, and it's worth like millions nowadays. So
yeah, that's a pretty hefty amount even back then. So.
Yeah. So anyway, so we got three. We have 3 of the 5 original Hall of Famers as Masons, but when you sent me a list, something like 20% currently, or somewhere in that neighborhood of the men enshrined in the Hall of Fame are Masons.
Yeah, so that number's dropped a little bit because we have some big classes, but yeah, right around there. So quick side here as to how I got to this research. So I was raised in 2016 in Otsego Lodge, and I was working here at the Hall of Fame before that. And part of my job is to help school groups when they come on their field trips. And we do have the largest repository of baseball artifacts, including documents. We have over 3 million documents in our library. So part of it is to go through our subject folders to help schools find out what they want to research. And so going through, I saw a list and on that list it said Freemasons. I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. So I went and I pulled the folder and I came across this document here. I made a copy and highlighted it myself. I guarantee you, if you look at enough publications at the time, be it the MSA or through Royal Arch Mason Magazine or whatever I know they changed the name since then, but I'm a Northern Jurisdiction guy myself. So whatever the Northern Jurisdiction magazine was at the time, or Southern Jurisdiction, I bet you'll find this guy's lists here somewhere. His name was Jerry Erickson. He was a brother out of California, and his hobby was to find every single person related to baseball that was a Mason. That doesn't mean baseball players. That means TV or radio announcer, a writer, an umpire, anyone who had a connection to Major League Baseball that was a Mason. He wanted to compile a list. The list I have here says final list, 561. I know for a fact this is not the final list because after finding this list, and it piqued my interest, I started doing some more research into it and found out that the Grand Lodge of New York, in its Livingston Library, which has a small museum, had a small exhibit on Masons and baseball. So I reached out to the library and the librarian there who had done the research for that, and sure enough, the Grand Lodge of New York's library has a larger number. I believe it's 600 and something. I don't quite remember the number, and I haven't been able to get a hold of that copy again since I did that initial research. I found one other Mason from that list, and I made sure to write it on my list so I had it. But yeah, so from that, I came across another item of the Hall of Fame's collection, this book, which I've tried finding, and it's definitely out of print. I don't even think the publisher's still around, called Brothers of the Diamond, Freemasonry and Professional Baseball by Christopher L. Murphy. And in here, Brother Murphy comes up with a decent list of Hall of Famers. It's about 30 that are all Brother Masons. And so combining these along with some additional research of my own through newspapers and periodicals and that kind of stuff, I came up with a list of 59 confirmed members of the Hall of Fame that are Freemasons. At the time, it was like 19.7% or something like that. And we've had some pretty large classes the last couple of years. So now that number, I believe, is just under 19%. So right now, there are 323 members of the Hall of Fame. This summer, it'll change to 329. So we have a pretty big class coming in this year as well. That induction ceremony is going to be in just 3 weeks. So it'll be pretty exciting. None of them are Masons that I know of, but there's no reason we can't change that.
But here in Washington, we're excited about the fact that our own Edgar Martinez is going in this year.
And over here on the other side, on the East Coast, they're really excited about Mariano Rivera, the Yankee closer. So yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting year at the induction ceremony this year.
Yeah, you were telling us in the green room earlier that this might be a pretty big stretch for your little hamlet there to try to accommodate all those people.
Yeah, the village of Cooperstown has about 1,800 year-round residents. Our record for the largest induction was in 2007, and that was 2 huge names in baseball. Cal Ripken Jr. and Tony Gwynn were inducted, and that drew approximately 80,000 people. So from 1,800 to 80,000 is a pretty big jump, and we're definitely expecting it to be close, if not past that, this year, because Yankee fans are going to be excited not just for Mariano Rivera, but also Mike Mussina is a former Yankee, as well as one of the guys that came in through the committee. I can't remember if it was Baines or if it was Smith. I think Lee Smith played for the Yankees for a short time. And then obviously Edgar Martinez, and Seattle fans have been calling for him to be in the Hall of Fame since I think the day he retired. So last year of eligibility, and he finally got in, and Seattle fans came out in droves for Griffey. So we're hoping to see a lot of Seattle fans come out again this year for the guy whose name is on the street that the Mariners play on, right? Isn't it? Do you know what they named it? It's
Edgar Martinez Drive.
Edgar Martinez Drive. There we go.
And it's actually on the corner. It's actually on the corner of Edgar Martinez Drive and Dave Niehaus Way. Dave Niehaus, of course, he's also in the Hall of Fame, as you know, as in the broadcast wing. He was the original broadcaster, original voice of the Mariners. So whenever you hear the first opening of a game, welcome to the corner of Edgar and Dave. That's how it starts. And right on so it's really kind of cool. And of course, there's a Griffey statue there, so it's really kind of neat. So now, just kind of a quick aside, baseball isn't the only sport that has had Masons. Obviously, I understand you're working on, and this is kind of of interest to us here in Washington, because Matt, I know you're kind of interested in this as well. Hockey.
Yeah. So there's actually a book I came across. Oh man, I wish I could think of it. I think it's Brothers on the Ice, I think is the name of it. Kind of a theme, it's Brothers on the Diamond, Brothers on the Ice. But if you do a quick Google search for Freemasons hockey book, you'll come across it. It was, unfortunately, I can't think of the title or the author's name right now, who researched hockey Hall of Famers that were Masons. And so, as baseball is my number one love, my favorite sport, but hockey is not that far behind. So I've taken his research. I've started doing my own. I'm yet to come across any other hockey Hall of Famers that are Masons, but I'm working to improve it. Not nearly as high of a percentage in hockey as it is baseball. I want to say it's around 15 that he came up with. But yeah, compared to the 59 we know of in baseball. So, and I think they have more Hall of Famers in hockey too than we do in baseball. So not nearly as good of a percentage, but yeah, it's definitely something that I think I've exhausted the baseball thing. There's one player that I need more information on for baseball. Lefty Grove showed up in a all Masonic all-star game played in Trenton, New Jersey in 1939.
Wow.
And I came across a photo of it on a lodge's website, and it was this tiny little thumbnail, and it had a name of all the players in there, and Lefty Grove's one of them. And everyone in there is a Mason, and a whole bunch of them wearing their shrine fezzes. It was put on by a Tall Cedars of Lebanon forest, so a bunch of them are wearing their Tall Cedars of Lebanon forest hats. And Lefty Grove is not wearing anything Masonic in the photo, but it's an all Masonic all-star game, so you'd think he'd be a Mason to be in there. And luckily this past year, I came across a Facebook post from the Scottish Rite Northern Masonic Jurisdiction's Facebook page that had the same photo in it. So I was really excited that I actually had a chance to find out where this photo was and get a good look at it. And I went to Masonicon in Attleboro, Massachusetts, which going to do a shameless plug for them right now. Best Masonic event I've ever been to. Next year is going to be the last one. So Masonicon in Attleboro, Massachusetts next April. Make sure you go. And on the way there, I stopped in Lexington, which is the headquarters for the Northern Masonic Jurisdiction, Lexington, Mass. And got to take a look at the photo. And sure enough, Grove is not wearing anything Masonic other than that photo and the fact he played in this all-star game. There's no proof that he was ever a Mason. So he is my little hiccup that I have to figure out why he was in that game if he's not a Mason, or if he is a Mason, where was he? And it's hard, as you can imagine, doing research into whether or not a guy was a Mason's tough, because especially with baseball players, they travel from team to team, so they could live in 5 or 6 different states just based on who they played for, plus their home team, and then anywhere where they grew up, and then anywhere they lived later on in life. Some of these guys, you could be reaching out to 9 or 10 different states, let alone, if it's a Prince Hall affiliate or if it's a 4-letter or 3-letter Grand Lodge. It can take a lot of time just to figure out if one guy was a Mason. So yeah, that's the one thing left in baseball that I really need to look into. But yeah, hockey is definitely next on the agenda for me.
Well, hopefully we'll have more than one in the future. So while we're on the subject of shameless plugs, we look at your profile picture, and you're wearing a jersey. I have that jersey, and I don't know, I've suddenly become your Northwest sales representative on those things. But yeah, why not? Let's do a quick shameless plug on this little thing you have called Two Pillars Apparel.
Yeah, so when I presented at the Hall of Fame symposium about my findings on Masonry, and when I did, I wanted a shirt that kind of reflected that. So I actually made a shirt that looks kind of like this. You can see my square and compasses mixed in with baseball imagery there. So you got two crossed bats along with the first and third to home. So I came up with this jersey or this shirt in the old Raglan style. On the back has all the Hall of Famers listed. And from there was quite a bit of interest in that. So I made some shirts with that. And then I was like at a baseball game, I was like, I really wish I had a baseball jersey. That kind of says I'm a Mason. So I made a shirt that says Freemasons. And as you said, it's been quite popular, and that's especially in the Pacific Northwest. I wonder why that is. And from there, it just...
When I came back to share my memories of Cooperstown with my lodge, I actually wore that in lodge, and of course somebody from lodge ordered it, and then we had a district meeting where they said, wear the jersey of your favorite team. Well, I love my Mariners, but it's tough to love them sometimes. It really is.
As a Mets fan, I can relate to that.
Yeah, but your Mets have at least won a World Series. Two. Yeah, we've won two less. I mean, we're still hanging on to 1995. The only thing parallels, you guys held on to 1969 forever. But we still hold on to 1995 and to a lesser degree 2001. So so because it's so tough to love our home team, you always love the fact you're a brother in the lodge. So popping on that Freemasons jersey was a fun and easy thing to do, and I'm glad that people like it and people are ordering it from you, and that you're shipping it. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and it continuously expands too. So I'm a member of the Valley of Schenectady in the Northern Masonic jurisdiction for the Scottish Rite, and I've got my modified Pirates cap here to reflect that. And so I'm wearing this to we're going to a baseball game. We have the Houston Astros single A short season affiliate is the Tri-City Valley Cats, and one of the three cities in the Tri-Cities is Schenectady. So the Valley of Schenectady, or Sigma Bodies, we will be heading to their game, and I'll make sure we have an order of those caps, and we've got some Scottish Rite jerseys that we're going to order, and it's going to be great. I can't wait to roll into the stadium wearing some baseball gear with the guys. It's going to be fun. But that's really where this whole thing came out of. I wanted stuff that I would want to wear with not just the square and compasses thrown on it, but something that was kind of designed around sporting goods and sporting apparel that spoke to me as a Mason too. So that's where it came from, and that's really what the designs are. All the new stuff's all stuff that I want to wear.
So I don't know how David's doing questions, but somebody texted me one, so I figured I'll go ahead and ask it. Guy asked, apparently he's never been to Cooperstown, so this is good. He wonders, is there any tangible memorials or structures of Abner Doubleday, even though it's obvious he didn't invent the game in Cooperstown?
So the current answer is no. However, there used to be a state historic marker. So in New York, we have these our state colors are blue and gold. So it's this big blue and gold metal sign that said birthplace of baseball, and had a little bit of information about Abner Doubleday. That's since been removed for obvious reasons. But other than that, I really haven't come across anything with Doubleday, because once it was pretty well known that was bad history, Cooperstown really tried to distance ourselves from that story. We do have the Doubleday ball on display at the Hall of Fame, which is the ball that Abner Graves, the guy who claimed that he was at that game that allegedly occurred in 1839 that we know did not. That's on display, and we have it on display to kind of teach people that story is not true. So yeah, we've tried to distance ourselves from the Doubleday myth as much as possible. Now, Doubleday Field is still obviously named Doubleday Field. The term Doubleday gets used quite often, but no, there's no real monument or anything to Doubleday, but that's a great question.
And look at somebody just sent me, and I don't know how to do it on this phone, just sent me a picture of Alexander Cartwright's grave marker, which looks really cool. It looks like it's got two baseball bats, kind of in the shape of a compasses, and all kinds of stuff like that. So I'll have to find, if I can figure out a way how to show it up here, I would, but I can't. I don't know how to do it. But it's
if you're able to send it to me, Jim, I might be able to display that.
If I'm able to send it to you. I mean, I'm on the phone right now, so I'm afraid I'll disconnect. But what I might do is I might send it. I might include it in the comments. Because are the comments live on the podcast for when people view it later?
There's live chat, and then there's also comments we can add, and we can certainly add it to the Facebook page in that stream as well. So there's lots of places we can post it.
Cool. All right. Yeah. Apparently there are people who don't know how to chat, so they're sending me text. I don't know. Sorry. Sorry, David. I don't know what's happening there.
That's all right. That's great. That's great. From all angles. So I'm curious about the infrastructure. How in the world does a little sleepy town of 1,800 handle 80,000 people or 100,000 people? I mean, I get Sturgis, they built infrastructure, but I imagine Cooperstown doesn't do that. And I looked on the map. I really didn't have an idea where you were, and you're nowhere. You're not near anywhere.
Yeah, it's always fun. I mean, I grew up generally in this area, and it's always fun for people when they're like, wow, you really are in the middle of nowhere. I'm like, yeah, as a kid, I had to drive 30 miles to buy an album when it came out. Like, yeah, it's not, you can't just go to the corner store. But yeah, so the simple answer is we don't. Everyone knows Induction weekend or Hall of Fame weekend is its own unique beast. You need to approach it its own way. So a lot of the locals just get out of town. Actually, a lot of them rent their homes out. You can make some good money doing that too. But a lot of them just get out of town unless they have to be there. And it's a great time if you're a baseball fan to be in Cooperstown. And with that, we have large parking lots that have trolleys running. And I know there's some plans in the works for the next 2 years, or for 2019 and 2020. 2020 being the year we expect Derek Jeter to get elected in. And even if you're not a baseball fan, you probably know that name, Derek Jeter. Again, it's his first year on the ballot, so can't say he's going to get elected, but I think everyone would be shocked if he was not. And so because of the increased number of crowds we're expecting for the next 2 years, there's talk of changing, having further out parking lots and shuttling people in, that kind of stuff. But really, it's people know that you need to pay attention ahead of time, find out the proper places to park, shuttle yourself to the induction site or to the museum. We have trolleys that run throughout the village, and then there are shuttles that run up to the induction site, which is about a mile from the museum. The induction used to be held at the museum itself, but we can't fit that many people in the little area around Main Street. So we moved out to the Clark Sports Center, which is named after Stephen C. Clark, Worshipful brother Stephen C. Clark, the founder of the Hall of Fame. So.
Let's see. When I was out there, I stayed at the Holiday Inn, which is just outside of Cooperstown, and and they tell me there's like two peak times that happen there. One obviously is that is induction weekend, but also apparently they have this tournament that's done on some fields outside, and it's not unusual for games to be running at 2-3 o'clock in the morning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's a 12U baseball tournament there's two of them in the area. The one that's right next to well, not right next, but pretty close to the Holiday Inn where you stayed is the Cooperstown Dreams Park. And they have over 100 teams each week come in. And again, it's 12 and under from really around the world, mainly United States teams, a few Canadian teams, and occasionally we'll get a couple of teams from Australia or elsewhere. And they come in, and it's busy. It's a 13-week camp. And it starts usually the first week in June and runs straight through for the next 13 weeks. And it's intense. But yeah, it's hard to find a place to stay sometimes if you're looking to come into town, especially if it's when those two overlap.
I was fortunate. I think we came in early May, so literally before everything. So that was a lot of fun. I got to share my personal experience being at the hall. Obviously meeting you was fantastic, and I'm so glad that we've continued. But also Eric Stroll giving me a tour of the archives downstairs. I got a kick out of the fact that he put he opened up this locker and said, "Here's a couple of things that most people probably wouldn't appreciate, but I think you might." And he put Ty Cobb's and then Roger Hornsby's Shrine Fez in my hands, and of course he says to go to see. you have now in your hands the representative of the greatest left-handed hitter of all time and the greatest right-handed hitter of all time. And I'm going, okay, this is kind of cool.
Yeah, actually, I wrote an article for the Hall of Fame on those two shrine fezzes. Actually, we have two shrine fezzes for Ty Cobb and one for Rogers Hornsby. Obviously, as you said, the greatest hitter on the right and left side of the plates, respectively, but yeah, for each of them. And also Hornsby, we have his the Syots. We have his hat from them as well. And actually, I don't know what their organizational structure is as far as their meeting unit is, but I know his still exists. And I reached out to them to let them know, hey, I thought you might like to know that one of the greatest baseball players of all time was a member and has your name on it, and we have it in our collection. So,
how do they respond to that?
Actually, I haven't heard back from them, so I don't know. Maybe they went defunct, or maybe it's just you know how it is sometimes with those websites. Maybe it's an old bad email or something.
Yeah. So here's the good. There's at least one orange baseball in the Hall of Fame.
There is,
and that's got a Masonic connection.
It does, yeah. Orange baseballs were used for one preseason, one spring training in the 1970s. I think it was 73. Been almost a month since I've looked at that most recently. You'd think I'd have better memory. So it was tried out for a short time. Players didn't like it. They said the red stitching with the orange ball was hard to read the stitches. And for baseball, that's really important to be able to tell the spin on the ball. So you can tell if it's a breaking ball or if it's a fastball and kind of get an idea of what's coming. And they didn't like that. The pitchers didn't like it. They said the texture of the leather was different. So they didn't really like it. It kind of got scrapped. But the guy who came up with that idea was controversial, but I'm a huge fan. Owner of the Kansas City and then Oakland Athletics, Charlie Finley, who not only was he a Mason, but I know he was also a 32nd degree Mason as well as a Shriner. So active in the Scottish Rite, the Shrine, and Blue Lodge. So so that's a fun little Masonic connection. And I actually did a presentation to the public here on June 3rd with those two items. Actually, it was the orange baseball and with Charlie Finley's baseball and Ty Cobb's fez.
Yeah, I could just imagine Ty Cobb while we get seeing that orange baseball coming. I mean, if you believe half the stories, he wasn't a pleasant man to begin with, and then now to throw an orange baseball at him.
Yeah, so that's a fun story too. So Ty Cobb's granddaughter actually is coming to the Hall of Fame quite regularly to do research because she's working to help clear his name. He's kind of known. Part of the presentation to the public was that Ty Cobb, who again he's in that first 5 elected into the Hall of Fame and one of those 3 Masons. He had a book come out shortly after his death and just lambasted him. Accused him of murdering a guy before a baseball game and beating up a disabled fan and all sorts of stuff. Most of those stories have been completely discredited since, but it really did a huge number on his character. Most people today still think of him as just a horrible person. In fact, he was included in a book, I believe it was titled American Horrors or American Monsters. There we go, American Monsters. And other people listed in that book were Ted Bundy and Charles Manson. So the fact that he was included in a book with them, yeah.
Now, on a Seattle note, you were telling me that one of our own here is a rather frequent visitor to the hall, Ichiro.
Yeah, so always been a big fan of Ichiro, but when I found out that he comes fairly regularly to the Hall of Fame, and by that I mean every few years, but the fact that he actually comes and studies the history of the game, he got a whole new level of respect for me. It's one thing to be a great ball player and honor the history, but to actually go and do your own research and try to learn as much as you can about the history of the game just put him on a whole new level for me. Yeah, he just came this past year, I believe.
So before we wrap things up, Hall of Fame weekend coming up. What's it like for a guy when he shows up at the hall? Because it's not just show up and give your speech and leave. There's some obligations that individual has. Do they not?
Yeah, so I'm going to take a step back from that and say how you even get elected into the Hall of Fame. So to get elected into the Hall of Fame, you have to play 10 years at the major league level, then be retired for 5. At that point, you're eligible to go on the ballot, which is voted on by the Baseball Writers Association of America. They only get 10 votes. So if they think 11 guys deserve in, they got to make a choice. Someone's not getting their vote. From there, 75% of the writers must vote them in. If they don't get 75%, they don't get in. If they get less than 5%, they fall off the ballot. So you've got to play that game of, does this guy have enough votes to stay on the ballot? If not, he falls off. And if they have over 75, they get elected. From there, that election announcement's made in mid to late January. It kind of varies from year to year, usually later January. And then somewhere between January and now, so between then and hopefully before May, they'll come and take a tour of the Hall of Fame, kind of get an understanding of what's going to happen induction weekend, know what the institution's all about. Staff get to actually meet them at that point, which is great. We don't get to do too much fanning, and it's one of the few times you can actually say, hey, it was great to watch you play, that kind of stuff. Because the rest of the time, any other time we see them, it's straight professionalism. So no fun anecdotes for them at those points. And then we don't really see them again as far as the standard employee goes until election or until induction weekend. At that point, they usually arrive, somewhere earlier in the week. Some of them could arrive on Friday, some on Wednesday. There's a lot. They have to write their speeches, do run-throughs, do tours with their families to say, hey, here's my stuff. Or, hey, here's some guys that I met and here's their stuff, all that kind of stuff that happens over a course of a career. And there's a golf tournament that we have and all sorts of programming that they're involved in. And it's a very, very busy time, especially for the guys that are getting inducted. Now, the returning Hall of Famers have a little bit more freedom in their schedules, and that's why you'll see a lot of them signing autographs on Main Street over the course of the weekend. But yeah, that year's inductees, you're not going to see them anywhere really during the weekend because they're usually just minute to the minute scheduled doing something. My favorite event of that weekend is actually on Friday morning. Ozzie Smith is our educational ambassador, the great shortstop started with San Diego, but really known as a Cardinal. He comes and grabs a few other of his Hall of Fame friends, and they do a program up at up at the Clark Sports Center, where you get to hear some stories and then turn two with Ozzie. So Ozzie will field the ball, toss it to you at second, then you throw it over to another Hall of Famer at first. So it's a pretty cool event.
That is, at least from a spectator standpoint, Mrs. Forbes kind of runs that show, does she not?
Yeah, so Jane Forbes Clark, she's the chairman of the board, and like I said, granddaughter of Stephen C. Clark, and yeah, she gets things done. She's a great representative of the Hall of Fame, and she's done this so many times. She knows what she's doing. And yeah, she's great.
Yeah. And one more thing. The Hall is independent of Major League Baseball. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. Yeah. So other Halls of Fames aren't necessarily independent from the sports that they work with. While we definitely have a very close working relationship with Major League Baseball, it's a mutually beneficial relationship. The Major League Baseball knows when fans know the history, they're better fans. And we know that good baseball fans want to come learn that history. So it's a nice relationship we have going on there. But we are completely independent. We are a nonprofit, and we don't pay for any of our artifacts. Everything we get is donated, and we also don't sell anything. We agree to take care of anything donated to us into perpetuity, which is legally defined as we're going to do our best to get it to 200 years.
Wow.
Yeah, we refuse to sell anything.
Well, that makes sense because then you can create an artificial market. So, hi, David.
I was going to say, being in a 501c3, is there some kind of a donation or charity program that's available, or how does the funding work? And maybe you can get into that.
Yeah, so that's not on my end of the museum, but I can give you the basics. So we have our membership program, which is honestly how we get most of our connections with folks. So you become a member, you get our periodical sent to you. I believe it's once every quarter, plus our annual membership materials. So you get a nice little lapel pin, car sticker, and a yearbook at our basic level. And then each level gets more stuff added on. But also, if you're looking to make a large donation, we have several individuals here whose that's their main focus, their main job. But yeah, if anyone is interested in that, if you go to our website, baseballhall.org, there's a button right at the top. I believe it's a red button still, just says donate. And that includes both artifacts and monetary donations. So yeah, that's if you're looking to do any of that, that's the way to go about it.
Excellent. Well, we can certainly get a link, that link up there, and we'll also get your link for your apparel company into our notes as well. Jim, do you have any wrap-up comments there or wrap-up questions?
I could go all day with this because I'm a longtime fan of the game. I played the game. I umpired the game. I actually showed up at the Little League ball field the other day to say hi to some of my old compadres. But I want to be respectful of everyone's time. But yeah, trust me, you get Nathan will back me up with this. You get two guys talking about baseball, we can go a long time. But hey, Nathan, I want to say thank you for checking in with us. I hope that you become a regular viewer of the podcast, and who knows, we might bring you back.
I hope for your fans that doesn't become a normal for me to come back.
Well, Nathan, are you senior warden in your lodge now? Is that right?
Yeah, so I'm a member of two lodges, Otsego Lodge, which we talked about. I am the current Senior Master of Ceremonies and Lodge Historian there. I'm also the Area 6 Historian, so that for the Grand Lodge in New York. So that covers basically the district in which I belong. And then I'm also the Junior Warden. Sorry, we just changed over officers a couple of weeks ago, so I'm not used to saying Junior Warden yet. I'm used to Senior Deacon, yeah. So I'm the Junior Warden of Delaware River Lodge, number 439 in Delhi, New York. And that is, as far as I know, the most recently dedicated Masonic temple in the state of New York. So 3 lodges merged and 2 sold their buildings. We're all going to meet in Delhi, and the Delhi lodge caught on fire. So we built a new building, right? Horrible time too. It's right as the merger is going through. But it's all come together. It's a beautiful building, and we're really happy to finally have a home. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, maybe we can have you back on for some Masonic history as well in New York and your areas as well.
Absolutely.
That'd be cool. Well, Matt, any final comments there that you might want to throw in? I feel bad because I've been loving listening to this, but I'm a self-proclaimed not a super sports fan. I know it's good for business, but try to watch Sports Center, and I get into a conversation with somebody, and then they're often literally left field, pun intended, and I have no idea what they're talking about. So I find that it's just easier just to say I just don't know anything about sports. I understand the game, but I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, I mean, it was just great to sit back and watch two guys who know what they're talking about talk about it. Thank you very much, Nathan, for being on the podcast. I actually have family over in Red Hook, so it's not too terribly far from where you are. Not at all. And spent some time in Saratoga when I was in the Navy. But no, it's thank you very much for being here. And it was, like I said, it was just great to listen to you guys talk about something you're so knowledgeable and passionate about.
Absolutely. And everybody, if you could, please remember to like the video on YouTube and also on our Facebook page. We do have a Discord server if you're into that, if you're more on the gaming side and want to have a chat or video there as well. So please follow us on and subscribe on YouTube and hit the notification button if you want to be notified of our upcoming shows. Something else kind of exciting to let you all know, we are moving. Even though this is called a podcast, it's been primarily on live video or recorded video, and we're moving into true podcast land. We found a podcast service, and we are now certainly on Spotify. The service we're using is Anchor, so if you go to anchor.fm, you can find us there and subscribe. But it's also, it propagates to Spotify. And then we're working with Google and Apple. They're a little more picky about their rules and some approval timing. And so hopefully in the next week or two here, we'll be actually on Google Play and also on iTunes podcast. So look for us there. Just search for the Working Tools podcast and you can find us. We'll put some links into Facebook. And so again, thanks so much, Nathan, for being with us. And Jim, thank you so much for being a co-host. Well, you may have just popped off there. But thank you so much for being a co-host with us today. We really appreciate it and look forward to having you both back. And also, again, thoughts and prayers to Connor as he's dealing with his family issues. Again, thanks for joining the Working Tools podcast. Have a great afternoon.